Welcome to Sober Dad Crew, the podcast where we talk about all things dad, sobriety, recovery, parenting, music, tattoos, and more. For more information or to get in touch, visit soberdadcrew.com. My guest this episode is Alexander Rosenberg, a Philadelphia-based artist, educator, and writer. But if his name seems familiar to you, it is because he appeared on Blown Away, the Netflix series about glass blowing. Welcome to Sober Dad Crew. Thank you for coming on, and we're totally going to talk about sobriety and recovery, but really, I want to talk about your art first. And one reason is long ago, I did tourism marketing in the Finger Lakes in New York, and my office was based in Corning.
Oh, cool.
And so I did a lot of stuff with the Corning Museum of Glass people, and I had the opportunity to do a little glass work. And I kind of wanted to throw it all away and become a glass artist, which I didn't do, but I did this pulled glass piece. And I didn't realize how hard it would be to like pull the glass.
It is shockingly resistant.
I thought,
but yeah, that story, the story of like trying glass and being ready to kind of like walk away from the rest of your life and start over is a common one. And I'm not sure. I don't know. I'm not sure what it is about. Well, I actually do have some ideas about what it is about the material that does that for me anyway. But I hear that a lot. And I know a lot of people that did that, that I know a lot of people that are kind of in the glass field that might have been totally successful in another career first, that just decided that this was calling to them and that they were ready to go and start over.
Right, that's where they're going to make their great wealth being an artist.
Yeah, I don't know about that. The joke is a good way to make a small fortune in glass is to start with a large fortune.
Yeah. But so how did you get into it? Like, what's kind of your background? Were you always into art? Like, what's your story a little bit?
Yeah, I was always into art, and, which I think it's fortunate. I think some people struggle with like, what they want to do or who the person, how they want to make a living. And I think I was always pretty sure that I wanted to be involved in the arts in some way or another. And I wasn't involved in music for a while. I did play in bands and things like that. I was kind of excited to hear that you had talked to Art Alexicus. I'd been a fan of, in the 90s when that was kind of going on. And I even kind of remember the story around him. But I kind of, I guess like anybody struggling with addiction stuff, it's all kind of interwoven. So I did end up, I didn't finish high school initially. I was kind of struggling, and I ended up kind of going to a lot of places to try to figure that out. And I ended up on the West Coast. And while I was there, this kind of formative experience. I was roommates with another guy that was trying to get sober and fix his life. And he was taking classes at the local community college. This is San Bernardino Valley College. And he was taking a glass class, and it was bringing back these. They really weren't good. I could tell at the time, I could tell already that it wasn't really fine in any way. It wasn't really a good art work. It wasn't really a fine craft, but they were these blobs that he had made. And there was kind of, I just couldn't imagine. I thought of glass as this really industrial process. I couldn't imagine it as something that was done by like a human hand. And my curiosity was enough that I decided to go and take the class. I actually don't even really remember the process of enrolling and stuff like that, but I was really curious to see what it was. And so I went to the place and I did it. And like you, I had this experience. I went and I did it for the first time. And I wasn't good at it. I don't think anybody is good at glass when they try it for the first time, or hot glass. But I liked it a lot. Felt like a fun thing to do. It was like a sport or something. And I kept showing up and doing the practice sessions. And I just stuck to it. I just kept taking the class. And I didn't even really think of it as like an art thing for a long time. I just thought of it as this thing that I like to do. So I kept going there and doing it.
And then from that point, so did you go back to school or?
Yeah, I did. I guess there were a lot of, intermediary steps to kind of getting to where I am now. But I did kind of, I was taking courses at an adult school, and I was able to finish the high school diploma from remotely. And then I got into an art school that I was interested in. It was the only it's the only place that I applied to, and I was fortunate. And I was actually able to defer. I told them that I was still trying to get my life in order, and I wanted to show up with the kind of the focus that the degree deserved. And they did that. They let me defer for a couple of years, and then I showed up to school. And I still, at this point, I had this idea, I think, a limited notion of what art could be. I had done, like many people who go to public high school, I had done like painting and drawing a little bit. That was kind of about and I went to, I did have access, like I went to see art galleries in New York and stuff like that. So I saw that there was something else, but I didn't really know how to do it or how to study it. When I arrived at art school in Rhode Island, there was a glass program there. It was just serendipitous. It was already where I thought I was going to go to be a painter. And I ended up taking a glass class as a freshman, and kind of I kind of figured out where it was and started spending time with the people there. And I started going to the critiques, and I found a really unusual program there. Like, there were the people that were dealing with these kind of immaterial things. They were making work that was made out of, like, projecting onto smoke or soap bubbles and ice that would melt over the time. And that to me was also really exciting. Like, all of this kind of weird material specificity that would kind of take you to these other materials. And so I decided to switch. I decided to go be a glass major instead. And I think, in a way, that degree, that 4 years, was, I think, really the thing that got me to kind of sink my teeth into the material and learn a little bit more about its potential than maybe what I had expected, from my first encounter.
Yeah, because there's sort of like a science component to it, right? It's not like just picking up paint. And I get, paint, oil, watercolor, like different things have different, qualities, but there's really, like, glass is very much science. It has a
It,
melting point, and mixing in the colors and all that stuff. So it's a pretty, and then of course, folks who've seen the show Blown Away, or in other settings maybe have seen glass done, it can just break. Right. So there's this, to me, this interesting, almost like sand mandala quality to that, where you might have done this thing that seemed perfect and then it just breaks.
yeah, I think especially early on, there's a very steep learning curve with the material. And so I think early on you really learn, like, if you have, I don't know, the stomach for it, or like the emotional fortitude. Like, it's hard. You see tears, especially, especially like in art school, and you're seeing people like staying up all night the last night. It's like 4 hours before the critique, and something breaks, and it's like it's over. But I think the flip side of that is there's this singular focus from working with glass that I don't really get with much else. Like, there's not that many other things in my life that I do that demand so much presence and so much focus and so much of my attention. And it feels good. It feels good to do that. It's kind of, and maybe that's, I don't know. There's some things that I've read about it that are kind of appealing to me. But there's this idea of like a flow state. Have you ever heard of that before? It's something that, like, professional athletes talk about, or
Like the
musicians,
runner's
people that kind of,
high kind of thing. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, where you're just kind of like, you lose a sense of time, you don't feel pain, you, like, kind of lose connection with your physical body. Time passes really quickly. That's kind of when it's going well. Obviously there's frustration. There's frustration too. There's times that you're really feeling, you're really aware of time passing, and you're aware of how much time things are taking. That's also part of, like, performing in front of people, is kind of an interesting component of glass. But yeah, you really learn right away if you're going to have, I guess, like the patience and the emotional wherewithal to get through some of the challenging stuff. And I hate to say it, like it's very, very hard in the beginning, but it kind of stays hard. Like there's always another level to get to, and as you become more attuned and aware of the different kind of subtleties of working with the material, there's always some new thing to figure out, which I like. It's like a constant teacher.
Well, right. There's no perfection, right? It's always striving. I mean, which I guess life is sort of like that, right? I mean, it feels like there's some metaphor to that work, or I've played a lot of music and like you can always get better. You
Mhm.
can always listen more intently. So I feel like that's a good thing, in life in general to just always strive. I mean, I kind of joke like every day I get up, I try and just be like a little better dad, a little better husband, a little better at work, like incrementally every day, just like try and be a better person.
Yeah, I think people who get to have stuff like that in their life are fortunate, things that you can really continue to work toward. And I think you're right. I think like learning about learning about the process of learning one thing or kind of becoming skilled in one thing can really be applied to all sorts of different things in life. And if you're the type of person that brings some kind of joy to or some kind of meaning, I think it's a really fortunate thing.
Yeah, let's sort of pivot a little bit about your story around substance abuse and how that started, if you're willing, and then sort of your journey through that.
Yeah, I can tell you the whole thing if you if you have
Go for
time.
it.
I'm a AA, like I'm a 12-step guy. I like AA for my recovery stuff. Although, I think there's all kinds of good ways that people can find some relief. But so I'm used to the kind of the speaker format. And I guess without dwelling too much on the gory details, I started to have a problem when I was pretty young. I think I was just telling this story recently. I remember the first time that I got high. I don't remember the first time that I drank, but I remember the first time that I got high. And I was probably about 13, maybe 14. And I had some friends, some older friends that I thought were really cool. I mean, they were really cool. And I was kind of interested in trying smoking weed for the first time. And they took me as this very typical kind of suburban North Jersey experience where they took me to the woods behind a bowling alley, like in a strip
I
mall.
grew up in
And
Maine. The parties at the
oh,
on
so
the power lines.
yeah,
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 the
exactly,
bonfire.
exactly.
Yeah, so New England.
Yeah, yeah. So my parents actually live in Maine now, but so I get to go there sometimes. But yeah, so we go to this kind of like wooded area behind a bowling alley, and they have a bong that's like buried in the dirt. And they pull the bong out, or it's like hidden in a hollowed out log or something like that. And then they fill it for me, and I smoke it, and I get high. Some people didn't really get high the first time they smoked weed. I got very high. And the thing that there's kind of two things that I look back in hindsight that kind of show me maybe that I was different. And the first is I don't really remember like feeling a particular way about the specific sensation, but I was so happy to be able to do something that made me feel different than how I normally did. Like to be able to just like flip a switch and suddenly I'm different on the inside. That seemed really exciting to me. And really pretty quick, I was like, well, if I could feel that way anytime I want to, why wouldn't I feel that way all the time? And I was the guy, again, it sounds like living in kind of a rural or outside of a major city. It's not always easy to find your drugs, or sometimes there's a dry spell, stuff like that. And all my other friends would move on. They would find something else to do, and I would be there like waiting by a payphone at a train station at 3 a.m. for some number to call me back that a friend of a friend gave me. Like, I just like wouldn't give up. So so I think I kind of realized I was a little different with that stuff right away. And eventually I found a friend who was that way too. And we became really good friends. We started a band together. We spent a lot of time together. And really quickly we got into kind of harder. So, we were experimenting with psychedelics. There was My friend Michael says that addicts and alcoholics are kind of naturally spiritual people, and I believe in that. I think like I had this real curiosity about like what was outside of myself or what was outside of what I could perceive with my senses. We took psychedelics, we did all these different things, but eventually and relatively quickly, it was the opiates that kind of brought me to my knees. Um, and it was, I think by the time I was 16, I was kind of checking in and out of places and having having all the kinds of problems that people have when they start dealing with a physical addiction like that, or dependence. And I didn't finish school right away. I went to some detoxes, some rehabs. I went to some like a long-term residential type program. I was really fortunate to have a family that was kind of um, giving me support through all of this. And um, I ended up on the West Coast. I was kind of had some different jobs and things like that. I was just trying to get my footing, I guess, before going back to my life. But I don't know what other people that listen sobriety story is like or what yours is like, but I was kind of a little bit doing some of the things that they tell you to do. When you come out of a rehab or something, they say, oh, well, go to meetings, get a sponsor, these kinds of things. And I kind of did it, but not really. I went to some meetings for a while. I think I really thought that like just physically going to the meeting was going to be the
Right.
thing that was
I'm here.
gonna help me. Yeah, like if I put my body in this space, like it's gonna. And I kind of started telling people that this guy was my sponsor, but he didn't know. I didn't. I didn't tell him.
Stealth
Um,
sponsor.
yeah, exactly. And but I was like feeling really good. Kind of did a couple steps. I think when you're young, if you, or at least my experience was, being like a teenager, just simply like I stopped using drugs, I stopped stealing, like a lot of life gets pretty good pretty fast. You know what I mean? You get a lot back. Got a high school diploma, got into a college that I wanted to go to. I went to college. I was good at college. It turns out if I'm not spending all day trying to hustle to get drugs, I can actually be pretty good at some stuff. And I didn't put drugs or alcohol in me for a long time. Like I realized that was a big part of the puzzle for me. Like I knew already that putting drugs and alcohol in me started something that was bad. So I was able to kind of hold off on that for a while, but I wasn't really doing the other stuff that people do. And I know different people have different ideas of what that stuff is, but to me now, it's like there's this kind of spiritual aspect. There's like an aspect of service. There's this kind of community of people that have been through something similar, and all those things I wasn't really paying attention to. I was just kind of a guy that didn't drink and didn't take drugs, and I think I was getting a lot of I was feeling like success. I was getting scholarships and grants and things, and the teachers were giving me good feedback about my work, and I was getting these internships, and I was making stuff that I liked, and I think that was enough of like an outside thing for me to put in me to kind of keep me going for a long time. Um, but this is the thing that happened, which I think is the thing that happens to so many people, is eventually enough time passed that like whatever fear or whatever the thing was that was keeping me from wanting to do this stuff, it kind of dissipated a little bit. And there was one day where I was with my some friends and we were on a trip and I was trying to quit smoking. So I think I was a little anxious and everybody was drinking beer. And suddenly like the beer looked good. And I was like, well, I was kind of like a teenage junkie. Maybe maybe alcohol wasn't really the thing. So I had a beer. I just decided to have one, and I had one, um, and nothing bad happened. It was like a little experiment, and it worked out so well. I decided to have another one, and I ended up entering the part of my life that I like to refer to as alcoholic classic edition, where I wasn't like shooting drugs into my veins, but I was drinking in a way that was alarming to anybody that was in my life, pretty quickly. I was still, there's a lot of, it's a little easier to be, I guess to a certain point, it's a little easier to be like a pretty heavy drinker in society. It takes a little longer, I think, to end up like under a bridge or something
Right.
like
I mean,
that,
we
maybe.
have bars, right? We have
We
whole
have,
physical environments that are created, or like we talk about on this a lot with folks, workplaces, right? Like a lot
right,
of professional environments. The marketing and business development director for an architecture firm, and we have pinups, right?
right,
And people pull out the wine and the beer. And I've been at other firms where we'd go to conferences, and literally one of the guys' business development things was holding court in a whiskey bar, right? So it is very acceptable. I mean, you see the meme all the time, like alcohol's, the only drug you have to explain not doing.
right, right. Exactly. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, so, and I think I really thought for a while that I was going to be able to, I still knew, I could already, there was already kind of a dependence happening. And I already knew, some people close to me would start to express some concern, but I could really get away with it professionally. Like I was college professor now in art school. Um, and it was just like, your architecture firm. It's a very bougie, I'm sorry, very boozy. It's not that
And
bougie. You
maybe a
don't
little
get paid
bougie
for.
too, but
Yeah, there's very boozy culture. All the school events would always have drinks, and towards the end, I would start taking like kind of boozy lunches, or even be drinking in the morning as people do. I was starting to get a little jittery, and I guess I should say this, like I think there's like, different people's bodies like crave different things, or, different alcoholics and addicts want different things. And I always was looking for this like oblivion, I wanted nothingness, like something that was like close to death, but not, or something like that. I don't really know what it's about, but that was kind of what I craved. So somewhere along this line, I started taking some Xanax. I think, somebody was giving me some or whatever. And I loved that kind of nothingness, the combination, I guess for listeners who haven't experimented, the combination of Xanax and booze is just like blackout, instant blackout every single time. And at least for me and for most people that I know. And that led to kind of developing a little bit of a dependence on the benzos. And for anybody that's experienced that, that's not a very pleasant withdrawal. It can be pretty um, pretty even kind of medically dangerous, but it's pretty uncomfortable. And I was sitting there one day, trying to figure out how to not be addicted to benzos and booze. And I just found myself deep in Kensington, in Philadelphia, which I think it's maybe the largest open air drug market in the United States or something like that. So it's a big place for illegal drugs. And I kind of knew where it was, but I hadn't really spent a lot of time there. And I just found myself like walking down to the block and like finding, I was back in my teenage self. Like I knew how to find the drugs that I was looking for. Um, it's true what they say about alcoholism and addiction as being like a progressive uh, condition. It got back to kind of where it was, and um, and even worse really quickly. Within a matter of months, I think things were starting to get pretty serious. And I was holding out hope, having this memory that I had this problem as a teenager, and that I was kind of able to I don't know, to get out of it in some way. I kind of thought I could do the same thing again. And stuff was different this time. I started checking into a bunch of different places, and it's just I would come out, I would go back, and just suddenly I would, I'd find myself checking back in weeks later sometimes. And it didn't seem like anything I was doing was going to help. Um, and finally, again, I don't know what was different, but there was this one last time that I was about to check into a rehab the following morning. I had this really weird dream. Can I tell you
Oh
the
yeah.
weird dream? It was like um it felt like spiritually important in hindsight. I
I
had this
mean,
dream,
people, you
yeah,
hear that a lot, right? I mean,
yeah.
you hear the last guy I interviewed talked about that kind of thing.
You talked about having a dream. Yeah.
Well, or yeah, or being in this park and the father of a friend from high school and the kid had died in that park, and the father saying, I had this dream that I was supposed to come here today. I was supposed to be like driving somewhere, and I had this dream that said come to this park, and here you were.
That's crazy. Yeah, I don't know. I love that. I love hearing the kind of magical stories, that come in to to when addicts and alcoholics tell their story. So so this night, at this point, I was like, I would go to bed high and I would wake up dope sick. My body would be uh, in pain, and I was waking up really early in the morning, to run out and wait for whatever was happening on the corner that I needed to go to. And this morning, I knew that I had a bed at a detox, and my girlfriend was going to take me there. So I was sleeping. I don't even know if she was there or where I was staying, but I was sleeping, and it was really early morning, and I had this dream that I was in Kensington. It was like the super bombed out part of it, just like vacant lots, and there's a little like a kiosk in the middle of this lot, and it's the crack of dawn, the sun's just rising, and I'm there with a bunch of addicts and alcoholics. We're lining up waiting for this little building to open up, and we're going to get administered this shot. It's like medicine. It's like, it's like methadone or something like that. But instead of something that gets us high or changes the way we feel, this shot allows us to learn the secret language. And as we learn the secret language, the more we speak it, the more we're able to speak this better world into existence by kind of practicing this language. And that's kind of it. There was this guy that was he was called the dean of the. I'm sure that's just because I was like in college
Right.
world at that time, but he was the dean of the of the center. Um, but it was really comforting at the time. Like I was in that state kind of between dream and wakefulness where I kind of knew I was dreaming, and I knew that when I woke up I was going to feel all this pain in my body. But the moment that I was in the dream, I felt okay, and I knew that as long as I stayed there, I could. Um, and I think there's some part of it that's kind of true. Some of the stuff, I mean, I don't know, we'll talk about it later, but some of the stuff that I do now with recovery stuff, it's very much about language and speaking and understanding words and things like that. So I went, and I went to this rehab, and there was all this lucky stuff happening. Like I didn't think they were going to take me back. I'd been to this one a few times before,
You again.
yeah, exactly. And I was out of money, so like I didn't know how it was going to happen. I think I had some money that I cashed in for the detox, but that was it. And I found out that I had been scholarshiped into the residential program for 30 days. So I went and I stayed. I met some really great people. Not all of them are with us anymore. That's kind of what happens, as I'm sure you know, when you're in this world. But they were serious. There were all these people around me that were serious about learning this stuff and changing themselves in some fundamental way, so that they could have a better life. And I don't know, it was good. I fed off their energy. There were a lot of generous things. There was this lady that came and taught yoga to the addicts and alcoholics in this place, and I had some kind of meaningful interactions with her there. She gave me some literature that I found kind of meaningful at the time. And when I came out, I gave up on trying to keep my job or keep any of the other stuff in my life, which I know is often a struggle. It was for me, I'd say, okay, well, I need to get back to work. I need to get this back, that back. And I just kind of let go of all that stuff. So when I came out, I didn't have anything to do. And one of the guys that was there, he said, you got to go to this place in Kensington. It's called The Last Stop. It's this kind of very DIY recovery place. It doesn't take, it doesn't take anything. You can go. You don't need to have insurance. You don't have to have an ID card. It's just a place to be. And I went there. It was really in the thick of it. It's run by this guy, Eddie Z. I saw him tonight, actually. And it was this, Kensington is a rough place. It's where I got my drugs.
Which
I
is an
walked into
interesting choice of then the place to go back to, right?
Yeah, and it was literally like just this guy. I didn't have anywhere, I didn't know where I was going to go. This guy I met in the rehab was like, he wrote an address down on a piece of paper and he said, there's a lot of recovery here. Go to this place. And I walked in this place and I'm telling you, it was like, I was like, how am I going to get sober here? Like, this looks like the place where you get the drugs. There's
Right.
people like detoxing on the floor. The building it smelled bad. There's just like, it was a wreck. There were all these people around that just didn't look like people that had their life together. But there was a guy sitting at the table. There was a meeting going on. There was a guy, an AA meeting or an NA meeting. I can't remember. AA, I guess. And there was a guy sitting at the end of the table who kind of looked at least kind of clean cut. He's like dressed in clothes that weren't stained or, whatever. And he was running the meeting. And I walked up to him at the end and I asked him if he would be my sponsor. And he said, yeah. And the guys that I'm really grateful, I'm still really close with him. He's been texting me while we've been here because he loaned me his car while my car's been having some problems. He's loaned me his car and he's just a really good friend in my life. But maybe not a guy that I normally would have sought out to be friends with. I don't know if we have a ton of similar interests and, but a really loving guy nonetheless, and a guy who has really good kind of solution oriented understanding of the 12 steps. And there's a thing, I know everybody goes through steps differently and everybody has different ways of doing it. But something that I really appreciated about the guys that I did mine with was they kind of treated it like an emergency. Like there wasn't really waiting around. There was kind of this attitude of like, the sooner you do this, the sooner you get relief. So like, let's get it done. There's no waiting in it. And I know it's different for everybody. And I think there's also something to be said for like being really thorough. But that's how it was for me. And it was great. And they wanted to, there's a lot of people that need help there too. So they wanted to get me through as best I could so I could start helping other guys take steps. There were a lot of really meaningful moments in that for me. But I think, yeah, there was a lot of relief to like do this kind of inventory step, where I really did I think that all this stuff in my life would just kind of happen to me and, for no reason, like all this bad stuff. And I was had this very victim mentality.
Right.
It was really great or really helpful to have people, to like go through my entire life in that way and have some people gently help me understand that I had a part in stuff. And to be better at kind of seeing that. And, there's some stuff in the steps about feeling useful. I think I realized that there aren't other people in my immediate family that are alcoholics or addicts like me. I was kind of the only one. And I think I always felt like I was a mistake, like there was just something wrong with me. And I liked when I was doing steps 6 and 7 and I was sitting with somebody and she looked across the table at me and she said, what if you were supposed to be like this? What if you were made to be this way? Like, what if this is the best way that you can be useful to other people? And that was really a surprise for me. I never really thought about that before. And the amends process is a really beautiful thing. I think there's a lot of relationships that I thought, were over that are kind of back in my life. And I think it's also really special to be able to do that process and not feel like I actually need anything from that person. Like it's wonderful to be forgiven or to have people back in your life, but to do the part of the process that's from me because it's the right, because it's an important part of what I need to do is kind of an interesting. I was always trying to get people back,
Right.
I was always trying to like dope fiend my way back into, some relationship or somebody that I could use or somebody that I could borrow money from or, whatever. It's interesting to kind of rebuild relationships from a different perspective.
Which is, I think, how they get rebuilt, right? Because
It
you're
is.
actually not trying to do anything but sort of say, sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. Or even like, I know that I was wrong,
Yeah.
and, I do the stuff. I do all the stuff that, that I'm supposed to do. I don't always do it perfectly. I don't always do it all the time, but I do my prayer and meditation and I am like, I'm curious about spiritual things. Like I remember to my childhood when I was always like interested in, like UFOs and like what's out there beyond what I can, I had such a big curiosity for that kind of thing when I was a kid. And I think there's some part of this pursuit that taps into that. There's this kind of magic and wonder, and I love it. Like I love hearing about other people's kind of spiritual uh, exploration or journey, and every time I get access to something new, and it's exciting to me. I think there's this kind of, I think a big part of what was hard for me that I think led to using drugs and alcohol is I think there's some fear that anytime I feel a way, like an emotion or physical pain, that maybe I could be stuck there forever, and
Yeah. I mean, I
I,
had some depression and I felt like I was living there, and then there's everybody else, and not my control, but everyone was against me and all that stuff. And in the end, I was like trapped in my own head, and I had to learn to get the hell out of my own head. It's like a good place in there, but it's also like a lot of like dark, murky crap that, and I think that's true for a lot of people with struggle with various mental health things, right? You just like kind of trapped in your head, and it's an echo chamber in there.
yeah, yeah, and it's so I don't know, yeah, it's such a weird big fear, and the idea of like having agency to be able to switch that off, by putting something into my body, I think felt so comforting to me, but now I think, now that I've had some practice at feeling things and just having it be okay, I'm even starting to be like curious about it. I think part maybe like my spirituality is like this commitment to feeling things and experiencing things in the world like as they are, or at least as they are to me, without any intermediary. Like I think that's kind of exciting a little bit, to kind of feel everything as it is.
Yeah, one of the
So
things with you, is you're a public person, right? You were on
a
on
little bit.
a little bit, like more
I was
than
at I
me.
was I was at a thing tonight and I got recognized by
You've
by a
been
by a
on the
person.
television,
Right, right.
right?
Right, right.
Uh, yeah, you know, but on the show, I mean, we just watched, I actually hadn't watched the holiday special.
Hmm.
My 11-year-old was like super rooting for you and like trash
That's
talking
awesome.
everybody else. I was like, can you chill just a little degree so we could actually like watch? You were public about it in a pretty broad forum on the Netflix. And and I respect that because not it's a personal choice, right? If you want to really sort of be out there, I choose to be public about it at work, and I think that it's important for people to see that successful people have struggled, and that you can get, there's a way to get through it and out the other side. I really sort of respected that you kind of came on there and talked about it, and you were fundraising for a certain organization, and I think that was really, really cool. Did you have to sort of think about that much, or did it just feel like the natural thing to do?
I did. I mean, I kind of, so I know everybody's got their own feelings about, how open they want to be, and everybody has different situations. But for me, it's always felt like the times when I wasn't open about it, it felt like there was a sneaky part of me that wanted there to be like this person that wouldn't say anything, if I like picked up a drink or something like that. So I think for me, like part of my commitment to this is just about really being open with it as part of my identity. And I think it's the more I have been, the more uh, the more the more feedback I get that it's good. That moment, it was a little intense. I knew that I wanted to do a recovery oriented thing for the charity. It took a little bit of figuring out because, again, like the last stop, some of these places, they're not very official. They're not like, actual not for profits that you can like easily write a check. You could like give
Right.
cash to a guy. So I found my friend Sarah, who was involved in that same place. She had started this not for profit called Savage Sisters, and they do recovery houses and outreach in Philadelphia area. It's a good outfit, and I wanted to support them. And it came to this moment with one of the producers, where she's like, "We're going to ask you to talk about this a little bit. Are you okay with that?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm okay with it." And I think I was kind of being a little bit, not terribly specific, but it got to this point where the story producer was asking me, like in front of the camera, like, why did you pick the organization that you picked? And I said, well, Philadelphia recovery community is an important community to me. It's my community. And she goes like something like, well, why is it your community or something like that? I was like, well, because that's me. I'm in recovery. That's I'm an addict and alcoholic, and that these are people that have helped me, and I'm looking for opportunities to be of help to the next person myself.
Yeah, and like I said, I just think that's super important. So let's talk about that show a little bit because I love that show. Did you audition? Like, what was the process of getting on there?
Well, so I'll tell you this too. That's a document of me 6 months sober. Is
Oh,
that
season
for
one.
that first season? Yeah, and I love that. I'm so grateful for that because I think I'm in that like honeymoon thing. Like life is good. I don't really have anything, like I don't have a job really that I'm going home to. I was adjuncting at community college, and I had this great boss, a friend of mine, also a boss, who I was kind of like, hey, I might have to disappear for anywhere from 2 weeks to 8 weeks in the middle of the semester, and I can't tell you why. Would
But it's
that
in
be
a
a
good way, disappear in a
yeah,
good way.
right? Would that be a thing that we could work out? And she was like, yeah. So that was really great. But yeah, the process of going on. So I had left I had kind of a full-time teaching gig, and I was running a program and some other stuff. And it wasn't really working out in a lot of different ways. And then, my life was becoming a mess on the outside, and I ended up just leaving, but I didn't have the next thing to do. So I had an artist residency for 3 months. I got $500 stipend each one of those months. And at the end of that, I had nothing else lined up. So I was there, and I can be really single-minded about when I have like uncertainty in the future. I'm really good at like applying for the next thing. I always was, even when I was a mess. I had trouble showing up and maintaining the opportunities that I landed. But so I did my thing, and I was starting to just like anything that could potentially be a job with my weird skill set, which is limited basically to like teaching and glass. And I saw this thing on Facebook. It looked trashy. I'm not gonna lie. It was like a Web 2.0 looking thing with like fire gifs and stuff like that. It was really, but it was a reality TV show about glass. And I also didn't really have that much experience with reality TV. I didn't watch it very much. I'd seen Project Runway, which reminds me a little bit of art school, and I'd seen The Real World like back in the day.
Season one. It's the
Right.
thing, man.
So that's kind of what I knew of it. And I said, oh my gosh, is this thing going to be this thing where they like make us live in a house together and get us drunk and maybe like they try to get us to kiss or something like that, you know? So anyway, I applied to the thing. I was desperate. That's the bottom line is I didn't think it was good. I didn't think it was going to be something that would be good for me. It's another thing, actually, it's another one of these like kind of unlikely moments of gratitude where like if I hadn't have been in a low place, I'm sure that I would have thought that I was too good for that. You know, I would have looked down my nose at that as something to do for like a real, you know, like a real artist like me or, you know, whatever I thought about it. But yeah, I was in kind of this desperate place. I needed money. So I applied and you had to make a video. You had to answer all these questions and you had to make a video. And I made a video where it was, I just know I was being really honest. I looked at the camera and I was like, you know, honestly, I just really need the money. You know, if this is a chance for me to make some money, I'm going to do it. And shockingly, I got a call back, or I got some emails back from the casting director, and she was really nice. I feel like I had a good rapport with her. I'm sure that kind of helped. But we went back and forth a few times, and I ended up, being selected to go. I don't know. It was like really kind of a wonderful experience. I think maybe my expectations were really low. Maybe I was just in a place where I could be like really, really grateful about stuff in my life. But I kind of had a great time. It was like, it was easy. The work was kind of easy. You know, glass is hard, but the work of that for the cast is easy. The crew works really, really hard, but we just like sit, we eat snacks, you know, and you have to go and make glass. It was fun.
Well, and it's sort of reality show light, right? It's not you're not living in the house. You're kind of
Right.
doing you're like doing the craft. So they're
Right.
not like doing weird things. You're really just sort of doing your thing. And it's probably a little weird to get judged because everyone's aesthetic's different and doing any creative act in a limited amount of like a prescribed sort of fake time period is its own thing, right? Creativity does not always fit into whatever you have 4 hours. Boom.
Right.
But that's like the shtick.
Yeah. But I say this to everybody, and it's kind of true. I think in some ways glass kind of prepares you for those things, like because it's this really expensive material, like you're running the gas, if you're renting time, it's like, $60 an hour to keep the equipment going. So there is this sense of like, I only have this much time and, whatever happens, happens. There are days you could have, 4 hours to work and everything, you mess everything up. And, that's, I don't know, that's hundreds of dollars, thrown in the trash. So there's a little bit of that sense of urgency. And then it is really performative. Like when you work and you blow glass, there's people around watching you. And if you do it for a while, you do get kind of used to working in front of an audience. So in a way, the cameras, I got anxious about it after the fact. I got anxious about it when I watched the episode for the first time. I say, oh my gosh, what am I going to look like? What did I say? I didn't remember. It was 8 to 12 months ago from when it happened to when it airs. Those things kind of stress me out. But like when I'm in the moment and I'm doing the thing, it's like I said, that single-minded focus, the rest of the world kind of falls away and I'm just having fun doing a thing that I like.
But you had your sunglasses. You have these cool, like, I was like, all right, he's the only one with the shades, kind of like Bono does it. I was like, all right. I mean, it makes sense because it's like super bright, right?
Yeah.
And you probably keep something from flying in your eye. But I was like, all right, this is like a cool dude. He's got like his shades on and he's like doing the thing.
I'll tell you the story of the glasses, which is, and by the way, I was trying so hard, like when the show was really blowing up, I was like, come on, Ray-Ban, like let's do a little sponsorship deal or whatever. But no dice.
Yeah, I keep trying to get sponsored on this. This is like not happening.
Let's join forces and get the
Yeah, I
Ray-Ban,
mean,
let's do some Ray-Ban blast marketing or
right
whatever.
here, Ray Bans got them
Yeah,
on.
exactly. But I don't know, it's maybe not that interesting, but like, so when I was starting glass, I was really, really focused. And I was like, I'll never wear dark shades. I need to see all of the nuance of the color of the material to understand, the heat, the timing, and everything like that. And then I did end up going to the eye doctor eventually, and he noticed that there were all these little burns on my retina. And I don't know if it's from that or I was doing a lot of welding too at the time, and sometimes you get flashed by the arc. But the doctor suggested that I wear darker shades. So I started wearing like whatever sunglasses I had around, and then I had a cool pair, what I thought were a cool pair of Ray-Ban. My girlfriend says I look like a cop when I wear them, but yeah, I had what I thought were a cool pair of Ray-Bans, and so I started wearing. They're kind of big, so I thought it was protective, and yeah, so I started wearing those in the
Yeah, I
shop.
didn't really get the cop vibe, but
Okay, good, thank you.
so the adults in my household do want to know who came up with the term best in blow.
Oh my God. Well,
Because
I,
it really was, as a marketing person, I thought this is like, is this on purpose? Like, I don't even know.
I don't want to like accuse him, but the director's name is Mike Bickerton. And a lot of times when there were like kind of racy puns and stuff like that, it was from his mind, in the like FBI trailer where he's like, speaking into, to tell into the talent.
Yeah.
We're not like scripted actor people, but the judges and things like that, they have little earpieces that he can talk into, and they're feeding them new little like silly wordplay things to. I don't know, it was kind of campy, it's like kind of like maybe deliberately cheesy, and yeah, I don't know, I think
I guess, it's like kids aren't really going to get it who would watch, and adults will get it. So it's this sort of
and that
thing.
is unfortunately like part of the glass thing too. Like every time you teach a class, you say, oh, this is called the glory hole. Oh, this is like, you want me to paddle your bottom? Like there's all this kind of,
Right. Is it
I don't
Pornhub
know.
or is it like
Right.
glass?
Right. Is that like, yeah, exactly. Are we looking in somebody's search history, or are we doing what we're trying to do? So, and there has actually been, I think it's interesting, like some interesting work to like update some of the language to have it be a little bit less like, I don't know, on the one hand, I don't think it's really that big of a deal. But on the other hand, there's like kind of a misogynistic history around a lot of stuff, and in with a desire to make the field more welcoming and more accessible to different people. I think some of that can kind of be a useful thing to do. So there are there's some interesting thought how to kind of change that language in a way that makes things a little bit nicer for
Right. Because
everybody.
I imagine, like many fields, architecture, all these things, being a chef, it was super male dominated
Mhm.
for like a really long time. And so then, right, how do you open up these traditionally male or white male fields to a broader range of folks, especially when you're not just picking up a pencil, right? Like there's an element of resources involved in being able to start doing what you do. You can't just do it at home.
Yeah, it's true. And I think it's really, I mean, I don't know. This is kind of, it's like, it's really important for the field to kind of do this reckoning right now, especially, if there's like an opportunity to have a lot more kind of diversity in what's been historically a really homogenous playing field. And it feels like now is kind of a pretty pivotal moment for that. So there's all these little kind of efforts and thoughts around how best to achieve that. And I think there's a lot of little pieces to that puzzle.
Yeah, and I think that the show probably did a good job at that, and was seemed conscientious in their casting to try and have a variety of folks on there.
Absolutely. And one thing that I can say to that, which I think is really exciting, like when I was a kid, I didn't know what glass blowing was. I didn't know that that was a thing. People come up to me at work. I work in a glass place, and I'm even making glass in front of the public sometimes. It's called Wheaton Arts, and sometimes like young kids, like really young kids, like 8-year-olds, 6-year-olds, 12-year-olds, girls, boys, everybody come up and say, "Oh my gosh, I want to do this." When I wrote, it's like that's cool to me that there's very young people that think of this as kind of a career option and aren't, I guess, like fettered by preconceived ideas of like who can and can't do it.
Right. And I think when you watch it, especially if you've had the opportunity, like I live pretty near Corning, so I can go, and it's an incredible museum and you can watch people do it. It's a little magical, right?
Yeah.
Like there's something that watching somebody do that and like manipulate molten glass is like there's a little element of magic to that.
Yeah, it's amazing. I didn't mention this, but like I remember the first time I saw good glass blowing. The place there where I was, there's a really nice place, but there wasn't a lot of technical ability there. The first place that I was doing it, and we had a Venetian come, which was, it's kind of this exciting thing when the guys come over that have been working. This guy in particular, he was a very nice man. He's no longer with us, but he went to work in the factory when he was 12 years old, and he was probably in his 70s when I was meeting him for the first time. And he came in, and I had seen all this, like people just kind of, they kind of pick up the blob, and the blob kind of becomes whatever, and whatever it becomes is what it becomes. And that's just how I was working. Absolutely. Except mostly my blob wouldn't make it to completion, mostly it would just kind of, and then I saw this guy, he was working from drawing, he would make a drawing of what he was going to do, and then he would do it. And he would have these patterns and little details and all these things. And it all just, I don't know, there was this kind of mathematical precision to it that I didn't know was possible. It was like seeing, again, things that you would assume were done by a machine or something because of their high level of precision that were just, it's just some guy in his hands in practice figuring it out. And that was really, I feel like the way that my mind was blown. I think the way that I understood the world was changed by that experience.
Yeah, that's cool. There's one more thing I wanted to ask you about, and it was when I was just researching this week, is what you did at the Eastern States Penitentiary. As a former rock climber, and also,
Oh my man.
someone who tries to think critically about our system of incarceration in this country, it was like super cool to sort of see, this sort of prison wall that became this climbing wall thing. Like, how did that come about?
I love that project, and I love that institution. Like Eastern State Penitentiary is such a cool place, and they were so amazing to work with. And that's literally, they have an open call for artist projects every year. And I had applied one time before with a very esoteric project, even more even more kind of obscure than that. But I have been a hobby climber for years, probably for 20 years. And that rock that the is quarried and it makes a lot of the city, it's what you would climb if you go climb outside in this area, this Wissahickon schist. And I just, a lot of the like artwork that I do, I'm captivated by people's like kind of dreams and desires. Like I like getting in the space of longing of another person, like trying to connect to somebody by feeling what they might have felt or kind of experiencing something that they might have gone through. And a lot of it's with my body. I think that's kind of what glass is for me. Like if I go and find some old blown glass thing from like the 17th century, there's no real way to know anything about the person that made it. It's like it's not really individual authorship. It's like somebody working in a factory, or maybe even multiple hands were on the vessel. But if I sit down and I remake that thing, I'm not just making a copy of the thing. I'm like reenacting the same movements of somebody else's body like several hundred years ago. It feels special to me. It feels like there's this impossible connection through time. This very, very closeness that you couldn't really get otherwise. And I think that's the same thing that was happening with the prison. I was thinking about people that worked there, people that were incarcerated there, looking at these walls every day, maybe having this fantasy, or trying, with their eyes, trying to think of what the route would be to get over. And there were hundreds of successful escapes over the wall, but none that were done entirely with free climbing. So it just kind of worked. And in the proposal, it's also like a National Historic Landmark. I almost said landmine. National Historic Landmark. And so it has these really strict constraints about how you can have work there. You can't put a hole in the wall. You
Right.
can't put paint on anything. And that to me felt a lot like some of the ethics of clean climbing, or this idea of like leave no trace. We don't want to damage the rock. We don't, all these kind of things that come up with kind of this conservationist attitudes that, around outdoor sports. So I can't believe they let me do it. It was a crazy proposal. And yeah, it was like a wonderful thing to just like hang out for. I got to kind of be a professional athlete for a year without being terribly good at at anything. I'm like okay, I'm good for like a hobby climber.
Right.
I'm not making any athletic records or anything like that. But I got to train for a year. Got support and funding to get like sponsorship from different gear manufacturers, and I got to just like hang out with climbers and learn and train, and it was really fun. I still do a lot of climbing today. I feel like I got a really good community from that project, and I still get to climb with a lot of people that I was kind of getting close with over the course of the thing. And I did make the book, so there's the best, there's an installation there which is still up actually, but I think the best part of the project is the climbing guide, and it's got excerpts from the archives about people that escaped over the wall. I have this great interview with two guys that I know from recovery stuff that were formerly incarcerated, and they're teaching me like prison craft. They're teaching me how to make a rope out of bed sheets, and talking about how that might have been used, when you were in prison. So yeah, it was a really fun project for me, and another good thing that I got to do that was pretty early recovery. That is just kind of a wonderful experience.
Yeah, it's cool. Thank you so much for taking time and sharing your story. I super appreciate it.
It's a pleasure. I love it's one of my favorite things to talk about, and I really appreciate the invitation.
Thanks for listening. For more information, for links to any music or books we talked about, or to buy some Sober Dad Crew merchandise, please visit soberdadcrew.com.